Hi, my name's Tamara Grand. I am an abstract painter and mixed media artist. Join me today as I make some textured papers on my jelly plate, inspired by a recent trip to the tulip fields. Despite having lived in Vancouver for nearly 30 years, I only just this spring made the trip out to Abbotsford to see the spring tulip fields. And I have to tell you, the colors and textures really inspired me, and I came home wanting to get started on some new papers. So this week I decided to raid my junk drawer in my kitchen and find a bunch of interesting things to create texture on the jelly plate printed papers. And I stuck with the colors that I saw and was inspired by in the tulip fields. So there's some quinacridone magenta, there's a beautiful deep cadmium red that's going to show up, some yellows and some oranges, and things like a bit of corrugated cardboard to lift paint off in an interesting pattern. And unlike what I usually do, which is try to get my paint as evenly distributed on the plate as possible, I decided to be really messy this time because those tulips, the frayed edges of some of the petals and the multicolors on some of those ones that almost look like dahlias, I found really, really interesting and inspiring. I used some large bubble wrap to lift paint off before I pulled a print on a piece of transparent paper, and then went right back in with a really, really bright yellow and some ribbon. Kind of hard to get the texture of the ribbon on the paper, but did my best, and I think it led to some interesting results. I also just dotted some paint onto the jelly plate this week. I had to pull a bunch of extra paint off before I could actually apply the paper. It was a little bit wet. Here I've added a layer of white paint so that I can put a print on and pull all of the extra junk that was on the plate. This is one of my favorite ways of cleaning the plate up, and you just never quite know what you're going to get. Came back in with some pinks. Again, notice I'm letting it be super messy. A little bit more ribbon in a random shape. Oh, I love the way that one pulled off. And you'll see that ribbon was left behind. This is an old brush, and I know you're not supposed to poke sharp things on your jelly plate, but the brush bristles were not that rough or hard. And going in and applying different kinds of paint, different colors of paint, and pulling it led to some really, really interesting marks and textures. See, I've done the same thing with multiple colors. And oh, the twist ties. Anybody else have a lot of twist ties or bread ties in their bottom of their freezer? That's where they tend to end up at my house. My husband cleaned the freezer out last week and left them all in the junk drawer, and I thought I'd see whether I could get some interesting marks on papers. Kind of hard, actually. They want to move around a lot underneath the brayer, but they did leave some interesting shapes behind for me to add paint over top and then try to pull the shapes through with that dried paint. That's just an old thesaurus. Again, coming back in with more dots for those colors, and this time I took a piece of saran wrap and just crunched it up and lifted some of the paint off, and it kind of gave a very interesting marbled look to the papers. Coming back with that bubble wrap because, well, apparently I thought it was very, very cool. And it does kind of look like a tulip, doesn't it? Anybody ever use macaroni in their art? Or rotini, I guess? Pulled it off, led some interesting marks, and here's what I ended up with after this day's session. These are all going to be turned into Petite Paper Paintings, and I've added a link to that video above. You can find me at tamaragrand.com and on Instagram at tamaragrandart. Thanks for watching.